it seems like the effort we put in is going to pay off. Inevitably, I had to endure another session of filling and sanding to get the wing root joints to a more presentable state. Needless to say, some surface detail was lost in the process, so those had to be put back in place. Finally, I was able to apply a layer of primer and then to smooth it down with the 3000 grit sanding sponge. While the Mr. Surfacer range provides a surface smooth enough for flat or maybe satin finish, if one is after a gloss look, it is best practice for the primer to be polished. That's my opinion though. After that, it is time for the Gunze Lacquer Gloss Black paint. Using Mr. Leveling Thinner to dilute it and light layers to apply, the paint never fails to deliver excellent level of gloss. Obviously, if even deeper gloss is required, the paint shall be polished. In our case, we don't have a shiny race airplane, but a regular old jet fighter, so polishing ain't gonna be necessary. I will leave the painted model overnight to properly cure, but in order to keep the ball rolling, let's go ahead and deal with another awesome feature of this kit, the landing gear. Here the camera will start doing strange things for which I apologize. But more importantly in this segment, the gear leg attachment pegs were part of the sprue gate. So at least now I can choose what length the thing will be. Really strange solution, to be honest. Another major innovation in this area is the massive amount of flash and parting lines, so those had to be taken care of. The peg on the gear leg and the hole in the gear bay do not line up at all. To fix that, I filed down the sides of the gear leg base to be on a level flush with the peg. Now this thing fits. After a quick Mr. Cement S cleanup, I decided to paint the gear legs and the gear base. Probably it will be easier to deal with overspray or other issues now and not when the natural metal finish is on. Still, it is a good idea to do some quick masking before the painting begins. For the landing gear area, I will use Tamiya's Dark Ghost Grey lacquer paint. To my eyes, it looks very similar to the bluish grey paint on the actual aircraft. Besides, in many cases the color varies airplane to airplane, so close enough. Since I am going to assume that the radome is not aluminium but rather some kind of radio-transparent composite material, I am going to paint it before the natural metal finish as well. Also, I think that it will be easier to mask the green parts for the metallizer paint rather than the opposite. The green paint will find its way onto the walkways and some other details, but for various reasons I will do that after I am done with the natural metal finish. If you have watched any of my other NMF builds, you know what's next. That's right, polished aluminium from AK's Extreme Metal range. This time I will apply the paint in cloudy shapes. Something like marbling, but in much softer and larger spots. What I want to do with this is to introduce some variation in the surface. So I keep adding layer after layer of fine clouds on the surface until I am happy with the opacity and the variation. Some spots will be darker and more reflective, while others will have more opacity and less reflectability. All of that in a very subtle way. One interesting effect that occurs is that opacity shifts when I change the viewing angle and the light hits the model differently. I don't have any idea why this is a thing, but in the current case it is beneficial. Apart from being absolutely amazing polished aluminum paint, this and the rest of the AK's Extreme Metal paints that I have are very durable. After I give the paint enough time to cure, I can handle the model without any signs of wear on the paint. Granted, I wear gloves which insulate it from the heat and the oils, but try that with Alclad. Next order of business is to do the paneling. For those of you who don't know what this stands for, it is another way to break the monotonous surface and achieve interesting looking model. This, much like riveting, can be questioned in terms of authenticity, but as there are many examples to back both sides of the argument, it is really up to the builder to decide. As can be expected, a lot of masking is involved in this technique. I elected to mask only a couple of panels at a time, mostly mirrored ones, and then apply the paint. And on the subject of paint, here I did a mix of approximately equal quantities polished aluminum and dark aluminum. This mix will give the first batch of panels flatter and a tiny bit darker appearance. For the route I chose with the masking, obviously I had to give a bit of time for the paint to cure, before I move on to the next couple of panels to paint, and also to be careful not to touch them. On the other hand, this way I can better see my way forward in the panel selection. With the same color I used for the first batch of panels, I did a few post-shading lines just for the experiment. Time for the next batch of panels, much the same way as the first one, but using clean dark aluminum. Again, very slight difference in color, as I don't want to blow up the contrast. Actually, the difference is so slim that it is hardly noticeable until the masking gets out of the way. And this is probably the hardest part of this technique, to get the right balance in the contrast between the panels. Not too little, not too much. Splash a little bit of post shading here and there, and voila! The surface of our little MiG is very much broken up and it does not look like a silver toy. I hope. I will agree with everyone claiming that it is way too shiny. Because it is. But the thing is that you can always take the shine away, while it is much more difficult to bring it back. The subsequent layers of varnish and weathering will take off the excess shine, so that's why I always start with more than I need. Something that every natural metal finish model needs is, in my opinion, some color. Not always applicable, but very welcome when it is. As I mentioned earlier, along with the radome, we will have some green color on the walkways and a few other areas. This, in conjunction with the markings and the board numbers, should make things look a lot more interesting. Also, having the aluminum paint underneath the green will give us some weathering options. Maybe. I'm not going to use hairspray, so we shall see how this will unravel. In fact, we should see the whole build come to its end in the next video. So, until then, thank you for watching and happy modeling, fellas!